cab around midnight in Jefferson Parish. The driver brought them to New Orleans East. A fight broke out, and apparently one of the passengers shot the driver in the back of the head. The three passengers ran away, but listen to this. The driver actually drove himself to Methodist Hospital, where he is now listed in good condition. On the night of July 26, 2005, my life changed forever. I was working as a taxi driver in New Orleans. That night, I picked up three young men near the airport in Kenner. When I asked where they were headed, they gave me a location in New Orleans East. They gave me the name of a school in New Orleans East, not the exact location. Now, this is not unusual because in New Orleans, when someone says, I'm going to, they usually give a landmark or a part of town like uptown or downtown or ninth ward instead of the exact location. So this was somewhere in the east I didn't recognize, so I asked for directions. So we were on I-10, and this was one of the more expensive fares because it came from the airport. And this trip went past the flat rate zone, so there was going to be an additional cost added to it. So um, when we exited the interstate, but still drove through the service road to the next exit, something inside of me shifted. And I got this strange feeling of danger that I've never felt before. So I called my sister Shawan and I started speaking in code. I asked her questions she wasn't asking. I asked them where they were headed so she could at least hear their voice and know where I was going, if nothing else, if that's all she had. So when she asked, are you scared? Not wanting to tip them off, I was like, yeah, you know, and kept talking. And, the feeling went away for a moment. But as I followed their directions, make a right, make a left, right here, the feeling came back and it came back stronger. And I remember having the presence of mind to say, God, just don't let them kill me. And instantly, it was as if time slowed down. I saw blurred streaks of lights and I felt like I was in a dream. Then I heard right here. Now, when I slowed down and looked, I was next to a big open field, so I knew what time it was, and I was going to tell them to just keep the fare. But before I could stop and get the car and park, one of them attacked me, and I was fighting as best as I could, and I remember grabbing the guy, with my left hand and trying to turn around to him, and my head hit the window, but when I tried to go right, it was like, and everything went black. I heard my sister screaming on the phone, but I couldn't respond. As I laid across the seat, I was thinking, like, did I just get shot? And then I heard, open your eyes, sit up. And when I sat up, I noticed that the car was still rolling. I saw blood where I was laying. I felt the blood running down the back of my neck. My head was pounding, and I didn't know how bad it was, but I knew I had to get help, and I didn't want to look into the rearview mirror because I've seen people that have been shot in the head, and I just didn't want to see anything that would cause me to panic. And my sister was still screaming, so I eventually told her that they shot me, and I was trying to alert the dispatcher and let them know, and I was a little bit confused between the phone and the radio, you know and the dispatcher was begging me, hey, stay where you are, we're sending somebody help. And I was like, now I'll take my chances driving to the hospital. So I started praying, no fancy words, just, every scripture that I could remember. You said you'll never leave me, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. And I pulled into the ER. My white t-shirt was covered in blood and I was screaming for help. And it was as if the staff froze, and finally one of the nurses told me, like, baby, come in here, sit in this room. I remember when the doctor came in, he didn't believe me at first. And then he was asking me and telling the story, and he was like, what do you mean you got shot? You mean they grazed you? I'm like, well, I don't know. And so they had to do a CT scan, and when the doctor came back, he was pacing, and he asked me a question. He said, did your mom ever tell you that you had a hard head? And I said, yes. And he smiled and said, well, she was right. And he showed me the scan, and the bullet was lodged between my scalp and my skull.
And he said that the adrenaline from fighting had likely saved me. Of course, they said it was a miracle, but I already knew that it was nobody but God. And that night changed my life forever. And 20 years later, I'm still here to tell this story, not because I was lucky, but because God had a purpose. My favorite scripture of the Bible is Romans 8:28, which says, "And we know that all things work together for the good of them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose." And I was told that what I went through happened so God could get the glory. So every year on this day, I say it again: to God be the glory.